We'd like to thank Montecito Bank and Trust for their generous support in making Scam Squad possible. I'm Patty Teal.
And I'm Deputy District Attorney Vicki Johnson. Scam Squad is up next.
Sound off.
1, 2.
Sound off.
3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Scam Squad.
Welcome to Scam Squad. I'm Patty Teal here as usual with Deputy District Attorney Vicki Johnson, and she's got a special guest today.
I do. Hi, Patty, and
Hi,
we are
Vicki.
so privileged and excited today to have with us retired FBI victim specialist Debbie Deem, who is known nationwide for her tireless work in helping people who have been targets of scammers. And she has lectured all over the country on how to recognize and avoid scams and what to do if you've been scammed. And even in retirement, she continues this very important work. So welcome, Debbie. We are so happy to have you with us today. And first of all, I know our listeners are curious. Could you just describe a little bit your work as an FBI victim specialist?
Sure, I'd be glad to. And thank you both, Patty and Vicki, for this invitation to speak today. I've actually got 30 plus years working with crime victims in a variety of roles, but the last 16 or so was working for the FBI. And I basically, what a victim specialist is basically a victim advocate or a social worker who works to assist the victims of crimes that are under investigation by the FBI. In the normal course of a day, that could include crimes involving child pornography, and it might include victims of investment fraud. I spent a lot of time working on human trafficking cases, going out on weekends and being parts of the, when they would target the different predators and get involved in some of the recovery of the young victims and labor victims and labor trafficking victims and all, and try to get them resources and assistance. It was bank tellers or victims of bank robberies, domestic terrorism, and the shooter cases, the active shooter cases that go on. So our work was basically any of the kind of cases you see that the FBI is investigating. If there's victims involved, under federal law, we were required to be of assistance to those victims up until the time there's either an arrest, an indictment filed, or in some cases for many, many years.
Yeah, that's a big and very, very important job. And I know you're continuing your work with victims in retirement. So could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'm not really calling myself retired, and this might be a word others want to use as well, because I prefer to use the term unleashed, because in a lot of ways, I've kind of been unleashed to be able to pursue kind of the continued work I want to do with fraud victims, because for so long, for so many years, fraud victims have had so little voice in a lot of things that go on. They're treated much differently than violent crime victims. The support that's given to them, even the language we use in talking to them about the crimes that are done, puts more blame on the cyber victims and the fraud victims than what we see with violent crimes. And I want to be a part of efforts to change that. So a lot of the things I do, I volunteer in kind of things locally and nationally. I'm part of a FAST group, which is a financial abuse specialist team that I run here in Ventura County that coordinates kind of helping the professionals do a better job in direct services with victims of any kind of financial exploitation who are older or have a disability. I'm also involved in just efforts to try to create support groups around the country for victims of fraud crimes and of some other things as well as direct services in some cases when I get asked to by DAs or adult protective services or others.
And Debbie has been very helpful to me in dealing with some of our fraud victims. She's been willing to go out and talk to them, particularly romance scam victims or victims of the lottery and sweepstakes scams. It's very, very difficult, as Debbie knows, to convince these people that they are being scammed. But if there's anybody that can do it, Debbie can, and she has been willing to take her time and work with some of the victims here in Santa Barbara. So we're enormously grateful to her. So Debbie, what are you seeing as the most current and or I'll use the word dangerous scams targeting our community right now?
Well, Vicki, I've had a chance to review, and you've done some wonderful past segments with your Scam Squad. So I kind of wanted to talk about some of the things people may just be starting to see. So The first of those is what's called SIM swapping, and that's SIM, S-I-M, like your SIM card that's found in every cell phone. I wanted to quote some numbers real quick. The FBI has said that victims lost $68 million to SIM card-based scams in 2021, compared to just $12 million in the 3 years between 2018 and 2020. So this is certainly a crime to keep your eye on, because I think increasingly we're going to see more and more victims of this. First, what happens is that the scammer or the fraudster will acquire personal details about that victim, and it might be through a phishing scam where they've gotten them on the phone, or a text or an email to get information, or maybe they've purchased that information on the dark web. And once they have that information that they need, they're going to call a phone company, your mobile phone carrier, and they're going to say, I lost my phone, I really need you to replace it, and my SIM card's gone and my phone's been stolen. And in that way, they hope that the phone company will give them access to that, or convert that phone number that belonged to the victims, turn that on to the scammer. And while phone companies basically often will require a PIN number or something to assure that it's the real victim that they're talking to, or the person that supposedly lost their phone or their SIM card, oftentimes they can convince phone companies to do it. Once they get control of that phone number, as you know, that opens the door, especially if people are using a lot of their apps to do financial kinds of things, or even if phones are being used in two-factor authentication and your cell phone number is the way that you have that second way to confirm something. If they've got that cell phone number and that's now theirs, you can be in a lot of financial hurt, as well as identity theft kinds of things that can come up. So once you've transferred that kind of thing, it can be, again, real dangerous. And I've also had situations where I know phone numbers have been hijacked in a similar kind of way for victims. Some of my chronic victims caught up, especially in lottery scams and sweepstakes scams, where the fraudster will actually take over the phone number and change the PIN number so that the victim doesn't even have access, and no one can call in to that person to find out how they're doing and all. So those are really, really dangerous things. But there is information that the FBI recommends that people can do. If you've been contacted by someone claiming to be from a phone company of some kind, don't volunteer that personal information, like your PIN or your phone number or anything, if they're calling you. Instead, you would call the number, of course, that's on your billing statement, or go down to the place, whatever that mobile carrier line is, to check that out. And avoid posting personal information, such as your phone number or your address. We need to start thinking of our cell phone numbers actually as not as critical as your social security number, but also one of the entryways that the scammers can get to you to do harm. So you don't want to post your cell phone number maybe on social media, or, be careful of the photos that you share on your social media, all these kinds of things. You want to use a variety of passwords, not just one, because if they do gain access to that phone number, and you only have one password for all your different accounts, it's going to be real easy for them to overcome that if you've got two-factor authentication and they can complete the transaction. So don't store your passwords in just one place kind of thing on your mobile device, because if that's gone, then they have access to that too. And again, don't advertise any information about your assets and things like that. So that to me seemed like one of the more interesting ones to talk about. And the only way people are going to know that that's happened to them is perhaps that all of a sudden their phone isn't working and they're going, what's going on here? This is my phone number. Somebody can't call into me. I can't call out. Just some of those kinds of things would be ways of knowing that that's happening. And again, if that happens, go to your mobile phone carrier. And again, please report that crime to the Internet Crime Complaint Center at ic3.gov.
That's really interesting and good information to have. And I like the fact that you likened your cell phone number to your social security number. We don't make that connection, and we don't realize how giving somebody access to our phone is so dangerous, because our phone that's a bad name. It's actually a computer that stores all of our information. At least many people use that computer to store all of their information, their credit cards and their banking information and their retirement accounts. It's
a source of communication too, through texting. That's the way that, you text both with your friends and family, but also if you do want to be alerted as to when that Amazon package is coming or that FedEx has gone out. So
Sure.
it becomes also a great way for impersonators to, again, once they have that cell phone number, to be able to commit those kinds of crimes against you.
Yeah, and of course, what we're seeing a lot lately is where somebody hacks into your account, your email account, and then they have access to everybody in your contact list, and they start sending out phony solicitations pretending they're you, asking for friends to buy gift cards.
Yes.
And, that's another sort of slippery slope, a dangerous situation, because a lot of people don't think to look at the actual email address. If it's different than what your friends might be, or they might not even know what your friend's email address is, they've never checked, and they get sucked right in thinking they're doing a big favor for a friend. So yeah, that's we've got to protect our phone numbers. That's really an important piece of information for us to have.
There's actually one more, kind of two of them actually. Artificial intelligence, we've all heard AI, we've heard of that and the use of technology and things like that, and how more and more things are going to be going through artificial intelligence with robots and all kinds of things. But we don't often think about the use of artificial intelligence in being defrauded by people. And one of the things I've kind of been reading up on a little bit, and I've actually had some situations where I believe this was used both during the FBI and post-FBI. But these technologies can also pose great challenges in other ways, especially with things like privacy. And what I'm seeing in the future is the use of facial recognition, as well as audio and video deep fakes. So that's where your voice or your picture, your image, videos that appear to be you talking, and it kind of goes in with what we see happening with celebrities, where a celebrity may contact you or appear on your social media site and tell you, that they're in love with you, or they've got this great investment opportunity. Elon Musk's name was used recently. George Strait has been used a lot in romance crimes, as well as some other people, Toby Keith. Kind of probably depends on your kind of music you like. You're going to have, there's certain scammers that go to that. So I think that whole issue of just fakes, and whether it's deep fake by cloning a voice of somebody that's well known, I think that's more and more the ways that future fraudsters are going to be using that technology to defraud us.
So can people actually make a video that looks like the person already? Is that being done?
Well, I think what they're doing is they're actually taking the pictures, and then and they're also oftentimes they can get the words that these people are saying, and they can recombine the words to make it into something else. There was one case that was something about a CEO where artificial intelligence was used to clone a company's director's voice and steal 35 million in just a one-time heist. So, they are doing this. At this time, it's usually against businesses, but I think we're increasingly seeing it with celebrities. It's being used now. And I have one case, I remember when I worked for the FBI, this woman that was just adamant that it was her son's voice, telling her that he was in trouble and that he needed money. And she was told to go down to the local Bitcoin ATM, put in those $20 bills and turn it into Bitcoin, right? And this was several years ago. And she was adamant that it was his voice that she heard. And she was very, very cognitive, really on top of things. And sitting back on it now, I'm wondering if maybe, this was one of those kind of scammers that had access. And her son was actually a pretty high profile guy. So maybe they even had access to his voice. I don't know. But I'm seeing this as a trend. I'm seeing more and more articles about it and descriptions of it. So especially the use of celebrities. Some of the most heartbreaking romance crimes I've had involve people impersonating celebrities. And there's supposed to be the blue check program where if it's a legitimate celebrity social media site, there's a little blue check on it to verify that it's real. But even some of those, I think you have to be really, really careful and recognize that that celebrity is probably not going to be divorcing his or her wife to marry you. Or that investment that, that celebrity is pitching is probably not that really the celebrity doing it.
That's really frightening, though, because you can see how people would get sucked in. You see the face, you see them talking, their voice is coming out of the person's mouth. The
Oh,
images
Vicki, it's
now.
like a science fiction, isn't it?
It is like a science fiction. And so my question is, how do you really know who you're dealing with? I mean, obviously the red flags are if they ask for money, you're dealing with a scammer. If they say they're going to divorce their, Paul Newman is not going to divorce his wife to be with
That's
you.
the kind of names that are actually being out there. Unfortunately, he's deceased, I think. But yeah, but it is really scary that that's happening. And the other thing, though, they're doing is, and these are some real sad ones too, where they're actually the fraudsters. And this was used actually, Vicki, in the case of the cryptocurrency romance scam victim that we worked. Victims are actually getting videos, and there are other victims who are told to endorse this certain Bitcoin, Bitcoin exchange, or that this person, the scammer, is really a legitimate guy and he's going to help you get your money, and he's just this wonderful guy to invest in, and all this kind of thing. And it's actually other victims that are being told that they have to do this. They're basically being extorted and said, you do this if you want to get your money back. You've got to act like I'm a successful kind of person in doing this. And so these victims are doing this because, of course, they think they're going to get their money back. And of course, they end up not getting it. But then that video is out there to use with other victims.
Oh,
and I have seen some of those, and they're very, very tragic.
Oh, that's so sad. Is there anything else that we need to be aware of at the moment, or?
I think those are the biggest ones. The crypto and investment kinds of things.
Okay.
That, and certainly money mules are still, very, very big right now. So I think just, again, being very, very, very careful and cautious. If anyone asks for money, if anyone tells you it's a secret, or there's urgency in what they're asking for, or the ways that they ask for payment, those can all be big tip-offs to you that it's definitely a fraud.
That it's a fraud. So, Debbie, I know, just in the same way that you don't want to be referred to as retired. What did you say you wanted to be?
Unleashed. She is unleashed.
Debbie unleashed. Okay.
I love that. And I also love,
too.
Debbie, that you are trying to break the stigma.
We do need to keep that in mind. We have to be careful of the language that we use. We don't want to discourage people or make people wary of reporting these terrible crimes. And we have to always remember these are crimes, and the people that perpetrate these crimes are criminals. And let's just call them that. Let's call them thieves. Let's call them fraudsters. Let's call them what they are.
So it's not just our 70 or 80-year-old or a 20-year-old that got something online. They're really up against organized crime that's involved sometimes in many different countries.
We have to recognize that this is organized crime. This is a big, big business, like the mafia. I mean, it is organized crime, and that's what we're up against. So let me ask you this question, Debbie. How can people connect safely online with others? I mean, what kind of sites are out there where you can kind of be comfortable knowing that you're not engaging with a crook?
I think there's several sites, and this is one, especially in my work with chronic victims. I always try to say to the family or to my victim, what are you going to find to replace that behavior with? That relationship, that connection, that hope, that dream, that reason you now have for getting up in the morning, whether it's that chance to win that lottery, whether it's, that boyfriend or girlfriend or fiance that you believe you're going to be spending the rest of your life with. And there are several online classes and meeting groups for ways that people have to connect. One of my favorites is called cyberseniors.org. And it's great. They're out of Canada, but they have classes weekly. Every day they have different classes, and they actually have a phone number that you can call in if you don't know how to go online, or there's certain things you don't know how to do safely. If you're age 60 and older, you can go on to that and they will tell you. They have different webinars posted every day that they do on different kinds of things, from travel to exercise. And most of these do that. There's another one called covia.org. Get Set Up is one that's set up here at Ventura County. And then from what I understand, many states have taken that on, and it's supposed to be one of the largest, getsetup.org. University Without Walls, the Foundation for Arts and Healing. So that would be artsandhealing.org or doratu.org. Lifelong Learning through OSHR has different programs through a lot of community colleges. And just a special one that I learned about, there's actually a virtual memory cafe for those with dementia to connect with each other safely. And that's dementiamentors.org.
Let's say that again. I'm writing this.
Dementiamentors.org. And then there's also dating friendship sites for those with intellectual disabilities, which I think is just wonderful. Again,
Yeah.
I'm not telling you that these are totally safe. Again, they should be monitored. People need to practice their safe skills. But there's one, it's at, of course, https www.specialbridge.com and myspecialmatch.com. So those are kind of dating friendship sites or whatever for people with intellectual disabilities or adults with intellectual disabilities. So going onto some of these sites might be a good way to develop friendships with people all over. They are monitored. I'd say be careful about friending anybody in person on these kinds of things, but as long as you're online and on whatever that site is, it should be a safe place, and you can learn everything from new technology skills, staying safe online, to exercise and cooking and discussing all kinds of things.
I love the idea that with some of these frauds that are so compelling to people and they're so addictive, that one of the strategies to get people off of those sites is to, or away from those crooks, is to give them an alternative, somewhere else to go, somewhere else, someplace where they can occupy their time in a much more healthy way. And so these are wonderful opportunities, I think, for people to have healthy online relationships.
Yes.
And it's great to know that there are so many out there. And Patty, maybe we can find a way to post some of these sites.
Right. You know, I will go back and I will put it on our YouTube video of this interview with Debbie.
I know you just have so many things you can share. Is there anything else?
The importance of reporting. Well, first of all, a family and friends staying non-judgmental and being there for support, but also how important it is to report to the Internet Crime Complaint Center and the Federal Trade Commission. And we could talk about those things perhaps some other time. And if you've got issues and you're an older adult, the National Elder Fraud Hotline, I really, really recommend. It's actually run, all their activity gets reported to Congress. It's actually run through the Department of Justice, Office for Victims of Crime. It's called the National Elder Fraud Hotline, and that phone number is 1-833-372-8311. And they can answer questions Monday through Friday. They serve all languages you can imagine. But anybody that's been a victim of a fraud or has someone that's age 60 or older that's been a victim, they're a wonderful resource. They do have case managers there that will help people walk them all the way through and even help them in reporting.
Yeah, that's incredible. Those are great sites to have. I have given those numbers out before, but we can't do it enough because you have to do it when somebody has a pen and pencil and pen and paper in hand. So thank you for giving those sites once again, Debbie. And I can't thank you enough for being with us today and imparting your knowledge and your wisdom and your perception of how these particular crimes should be handled. It's so, so helpful. And thank you also for continuing your great work.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. And thanks for being unleashed.
Yeah. We're going to have you back, Debbie.
Absolutely.
Doing what you're doing too.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.